But what I'm going to cover in this session is a little bit of compliance and accuracy when you are tracking your calories. And I'm just going to go through a few different reasons that you might have an issue with hitting your calories, or down the line, if something happens with your measurements and they're not moving, why they might not be moving. I'll be doing a separate video on like when you hit a plateau, which is completely different because you will hit a plateau over time, but that's a different video. With your tracking, you have your set amount of calories, and let's say you're on your 1800 calories, you've got your macros, whatever they are that I've given you, or whatever you're following yourself if you're doing your own plan. So if you're doing 1800 calories across 7 days, then you're going to have a total of 1800 by 7. And that's your total for the week. I'll be doing another video on banking your calories, what happens when you go over, what happens when you're under, and how to adjust that. But for now, we're looking at your calories that are 1800 across 7 days. Now, the foods that you pick to make up those 1800 are up to you. I just give a guideline, and I always advocate for and promote flexible dieting because you've got that 80-20 approach. I'm always pushing for that flexible mindset, flexible approach, flexible dieting, so that you're not in that restrictive habit, or that you're actually moving away from a restrictive approach to dieting if that's the background that you've come from, where you're never allow yourself anything. It doesn't matter how many meals you have, you pick however many meals work for you. Like, I wouldn't suggest changing anything with your current eating setup if it works for you. So you might see on the internet people eat, myths, like people that eat little and often get better results, or intermittent fasting makes you lose more weight, and that's not the case. If you're having your set amount of calories, it doesn't matter how many meals that you divide those up into. But what does matter is the food selections, because you need to be focusing on lean proteins, complex carbs, and also lots of fibre, so that you're going to be full. For example, I would have something like eggs and toast for breakfast. I might have an omelette, I might have scrambled egg, whatever I'm feeling, or I might have protein pancakes. Protein first thing in the morning is going to keep you full, and also throughout the day. So you always aim for a serving of protein with every meal or snack if possible. Now that might mean eggs and toast, it might mean a protein smoothie in the morning, protein pancakes, it might mean Greek yogurt in the morning, it might mean porridge with a scoop of protein, salmon and avocado with poached eggs. Those are just a couple of examples. If you are only having a scoop of protein in the morning, it's likely that you're going to be probably hungrier than if you had a bigger meal for your breakfast. If you're only having a sandwich or something for your lunch, it's likely that you're going to be even hungrier than if you had a big burrito bowl with lots of veg and salad leaves and maybe kidney beans or something like that. Because it's the volume of the food that's going to keep you full within those 1800. So you want to be having a lot of vegetables for fibre. Fibre keeps you full, protein also keeps you full. So that's why you want protein with each meal or snack to keep you satiated and full throughout your 1800 for the day, because nobody wants to be hungry on the 1800. So that's just a couple of points on the importance of the protein intake, the frequency of the protein intake. So basically every time you eat, obviously you're not going to be able to do it every single time. If you're really hungry and you're in a rush and you only have 2 slices of toast and you didn't have any eggs, it's not the end of the world. But I'm just giving you tips that will keep you full within your calorie allowance. Aside from that, when people say that they're not hitting their calories, or if you are getting stuck and your measurements aren't moving, and you should be focusing on measurements and photos and not the scales. Again, that's another video I've recorded. But when you can't hit your calories, or you think you can't hit your calories, or your measurements aren't dropping, you really need to have a look at your tracking. Have you tracked 1800 7 days of the week and not just Monday to Friday? Because if you only do it Monday to Friday and you're eating whatever you want at the weekend, then it's likely you're not eating 1800 on the weekend, and therefore you're not in a calorie deficit across 7 days. You're only in a calorie deficit the amount of times you actually track the 1800. So make sure that you're being honest with yourself and tracking on the weekends. The other thing that comes into play there is the actual accuracy of the tracking. So when I'm doing check-ins and I kind of notice that something might seem a bit off, whether that's portion control or the name of food, or on the other hand, if measurements aren't dropping and they should be dropping, you need to look at things like your oils. I've already mentioned this in your calorie and macro setup, but I'm going to tell you again. Your oils, what are you cooking with? If you're cooking with olive oil and that's not being tracked, that's extra calories going in that will take you out of a deficit. What about coffees? Anything apart from black tea or coffee or herbal teas or water needs to be tracked. Things like your sauces, a handful of nuts, you know, some cheese. Is the cheese properly weighed and not just you're estimating that it's 30 grams when it's a bigger chunk that you've dropped off? Hot chocolates, smoothies, what else can I think of there? Things like pesto, nut butters. You need to properly weigh these things out and make sure that you're tracking them at all. Because if they're not tracked, then you're not eating the 1800 that you think you're eating. So you need to make sure that what you're tracking is accurate. And I'll remind you again, everything needs to be weighed raw, uncooked. So that's your oats, that's any of your lean meats, that's going to be rice, pasta, anything like that. It's always raw and it needs to be weighed. You're not going to weigh it after cooking because it's going to be hot and it's going to be messy and it's absorbed water, and it's just a lot easier to do it raw. When you're weighing things like butter or nut butters and things like that, sauces, until you really know how to eyeball your own foods, they need to be weighed. Know how much you're taking out of the jar of peanut butter and make sure it's accurate. Don't put in a tablespoon from the database if you haven't weighed out what it is. You have to remember that anyone can put anything into MyFitnessPal. I can put in an item into MyFitnessPal, tablespoon of peanut butter, but you don't know what that person's tablespoon is. So you need to weigh out what you've had of the peanut butter. Is it 15 grams, is it 20 grams, is it 30 grams? It has to be in grams or mils if you're doing liquids like your olive oil or whatever, and not just in measures like cups or tablespoons like I've just mentioned. Make sure you're tracking absolutely everything. Make sure that you're tracking honestly 7 days, because it's easy for me to tell when I'm doing check-ins if there's something going on. Usually I'm fairly 99% accurate all the time. If I see something that looks a bit off, I'm usually right, and I might say to someone, what did you cook with this morning? Or what was in that shake that you had? Was there anything else that was in that shake? And they might say, oh my God, I had half an avocado in the shake and I forgot to track it. So I'm not saying that you are lying, I'm just saying to make sure that you've tracked everything. You will get to the stage where you will not need to track absolutely everything down the line. You'll already know, if you eat the same things regularly, you will know pretty much down to a T what a portion size of like butter looks like for you. Other thing that might come into play is if you're eating your calories and you are tracking accurately after doing everything I've just told you, you might be stuck on your fat loss. And the other thing that you need to look at is your physical activity. So has your physical activity dropped? Because if you were doing 10 or 15,000 steps a day 3 weeks ago and you're dropping weight and you're on the same calories, and now you're doing 5,000 or 6,000 steps a day, that's going to have an impact on your output. So you're not going to be burning as many calories. So just have a look at things like physical activity there as well. I'm going to do a separate video on plateaus, but that's just something else to be looking at if you think that you are tracking accurately, but you're not sure that the calories are right for you, because if they were working before, you have to look at what's not working now. So those are the main things. Make sure your calorie deficit is across 7 days. Make sure that you're tracking on the weekends. Make sure that you're tracking absolutely everything and measure them properly and not just selecting from the database. And then your physical activity, just make sure that things haven't changed there. So that's just a couple of tips. And if you're kind of wondering how to make up your 1800 if you're feeling a little bit hungry, make sure you've got voluminous foods there, protein with each meal if you can, so that you're not getting hungry. 1800 it should be enough if you're eating enough volume of foods, and volume means the size of the portion and not the amount of calories. And if you're doing all of that and then something isn't working, then we could have a look at, okay, maybe the calories are too high. And like I said, physical activity. Okay, my physical activity has dropped. Maybe I need to lower my calories a bit, or can I up my steps a bit more? So those are videos for another time, but this was just a little bit on double, triple checking that you're tracking accurately. So I will see you in the next video, and I hope that helped.